So welcome, everybody, to SpotOn Chat, and we are here with Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
I really look forward to these. I am learning so much. So far, we've covered the first 3 stages of growth. One of the things that I find interesting about the stages of growth is I don't think a lot of businesses even realize that they're going through them. Would you say that's true?
That's very true. And what's so odd is it's so predictable. All businesses go through these 5 stages of growth in a circular pattern. They'll go through all 5 and then cycle back to stage 1 again. So it's so predictable, you would think that we would notice them. But because of the amount of years that it takes to get through each of these stages, oftentimes it's different leadership that's at the head, and they don't recognize where they are. If they did, then they could also see the predictable challenges, crises is what Dr. Churchill called them, that they're going to go through. And, of course, by knowing what's going to come up, we can prepare for it and, if not mitigate it, at least find ways to around or under or over those particular challenges. But the typical entrepreneur jumps right in, builds a business, and somehow doesn't pay attention to them, whether it's ignorance, which is what we're thinking might be what's going on, or it's just, head down, moving forward, let's get this business going. We just assume our business is going to be different, but every business goes through these predictable stages of growth. So if you've been through an MBA program, for example, or even a good business course at a local university, usually you will hear about these 5 stages of growth.
Okay. So today, the stage of growth we're talking about is stage 4. And stage 4 has a really wonderful title. It's called Empire. That sounds like the title of a blockbuster movie.
It does. Empire Strikes Back, right?
Right, exactly. So tell me, what are the specific things that typify the empire stage of growth?
Well, first we have to remember how they got to the empire, right? So they've gone now through stage 1. Stage 1, of course, being this entrepreneurial stage where the franchisor is focusing on the product and the service and that, making the best possible widget. Then they've evolved to stage 2, which is what we call the partnership business, which now the franchisor is working more in tandem with the franchisee, and his focus is on setting up best practices and finding ways to replicate. Stage 3, which we just talked about last week, was the plug-and-play system where the franchisee is much clearer now on what the franchisor is offering in terms of the value proposition. There's stronger support, stronger systems. Franchisees are ramping up more quickly. And now we move into stage 4. So this is a stage 3 company that has grown market share. There's some market presence that's very clear. There's systems that are easy to replicate. The next level of franchisee that's coming in is ramping up more quickly. The value proposition is very clear. The franchisor knows exactly what he has to offer. There is a clear recruitment strategy. There's a clear training process, and there's a clear support strategy that's in place. In this stage 3, it really is a plug-and-play system. But we're getting larger and larger. We're building market share, and we're pulling in more and more franchisees. And so we're moving and growing where there's probably less market share left. We are now, once we arrive into this empire place, the market dominant player. We have arrived. Now the challenge, of course, with this market dominance, it also has now required that the franchisee take on more responsibility. The franchisee has placed some pressure on the franchisor, demanding additional services and products, including everything from call centers to local marketing strategies, etc. So, and at this place, the empire business is also having some exclusive relationships with vendors and suppliers, and they're providing those vendors and supplier exclusivities to their franchisees, thus giving the franchisees some savings in price points, etc. So we're the dominant player in the marketplace, right? We're the empire business. There's lots of silos. At the top of every silo, we have in the marketing department a VP of marketing or a president of marketing, and he's got a whole bunch of employees underneath him, and all they're focused on is marketing. Then we have the R&D department, and they're focused just on research and development. Then we have a whole legal department and a whole sales department. So there's a lot of silos, and we start to have more and more bureaucracy, but the left hand doesn't always know what the right hand is. But another way to know this is indeed an empire business is how they are growing their business. So in stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, we were growing through multi-unit operators, single-unit operators, franchisees, in the local marketplace. A stage 4 company is taking a little different approach. They are now going out and buying market share. So they'll buy companies. They'll do mergers and acquisitions. So they'll literally see a competitor out there, move into a city, and tell that competitor to move out or change the brand across their door. So they now just sort of grab large pieces of business by doing mergers and acquisitions. Now, as you can expect, in this stage, the franchisee is no longer like what we may have seen in stage 1 and 2, where the franchisee was more of a hunter, right? He's going out, he's getting the business, he's bringing it into his location. In this place, the brand is so large and so recognizable that the business is actually being driven into the franchisee. So the franchisee is less of a hunter and more of a technician. So these are the biggest pieces that distinguish what an empire is. So it is a stage 3 company that has grown to becoming the most dominant or one of the top 3 players in a marketplace. And the focus has shifted from product and systems and franchisee. It is now the focus of the franchisor is on market share, getting as much as they possibly can.
It's like empire builders in political system.
You're right. So, and as it grows, then the infrastructure has to grow to support it. Highway systems, water systems, electrical systems, communication systems, etc. And in franchising, it's the same way. The infrastructure gets larger and larger to support many, many more franchisees.
That's one thing I have noticed about franchises recently is some of the bigger boys that we thought of as kind of all being, just these separate entities have started to compound themselves. For instance, Kentucky Fried Chicken and Pizza Hut. Okay.
Yeah.
And actually, I saw recently Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Pizza Hut store all in one store.
Co-branding in that case, yes.
There's a lot more wheeling and dealing going on here, and the brand at this point is really, really strong.
Correct. They have a very clear value proposition.
Right. So give me an example of an empire.
You actually mentioned a couple of them. Those would be the McDonald's and the Kentucky Fried Chickens and companies of that nature that are the leader in that particular market segment. Many of these organizations will have 2 and 3 and 4 and 6 and 8 brands, so that's not uncommon. So yes, a very large organization like a McDonald's or a Jack in the Box would be considered an empire business. Century 21.
So when they're in this stage, they get to dictate a lot more stuff about what happens in their stores. For instance, am I going to serve Pepsi products or Coke products?
Absolutely. Those are those exclusive vendor relationships that we just discussed, where the franchisee is encouraged to use those particular products and incentivized to use them. But the franchisor has made such an arrangement with these vendors and suppliers that it makes sense for the local franchisee to take advantage of those price points so they can then pass it on to the end user. Because these are oftentimes exclusive arrangements, like you talked about Pepsi versus Coke, the price points are such that it gives the franchisee greater profitability to take advantage of those kinds of relationships. And that's only possible if you are an empire business where you're negotiating with an exclusive vendor that you're going to have 17,000 locations to serve, not just one or two. So they're able to negotiate some pretty good arrangements. So that's an excellent example of one of the benefits that a franchisee would have being in an empire business.
With every single stage of growth so far that we've talked about, there's been, the good stuff and the bad stuff. And I'm pretty sure that empire builders, although it sounds like that they're sitting in the catbird seat, that there are drawbacks as well as the good points of that.
Absolutely. I mean, if we talk about the benefits to the franchisee, naturally one of the most important ones is proven systems. We've now have some track record that shows what it takes to ramp up and do well. We have franchisees that know exactly what corner, what street, in what city to place a franchisee because they've done the research. So there's proven systems in place. So when a franchisee comes into a stage 4 business, the trial and error has already been ironed out. We don't have to worry about that. So that's a distinct benefit to the franchisee. The brand equity, the name itself has equity. The McDonald's name or the Yum brand name, it has such equity that the clout in and of itself is going to drive business into that franchisee's local marketplace. So there's a market dominance. I'm not the new kid on the block. I'm not taking the same level of risk that a stage 1 or stage 2 or even a stage 3 franchisee was taking.
So if you're in the mall with a whole bunch of people and the customer goes in and they're looking for the Gap, they may walk by all kinds of other stores because they're going to the Gap to buy their clothes.
Exactly. And that's why when I mentioned earlier that this is not, the franchisee is not a true entrepreneur. That's in stage 4. He's more of a technician. He fills the order versus gets the order. Right. And because the business is being driven to his location. That's just the way it is. The other benefit to the franchisee is the franchisor has strong financials and typically strong support. So they'll have whole teams of franchise consultants in the local marketplaces that are visiting these franchisees and coming alongside the franchisee to help them build their business. In earlier stage franchise systems, there wasn't the dollars to be able to support the franchisees more hands-on than what you might see with an empire business. And, of course, if you are a competitor of a stage 4 franchise system, an empire system, you're likely to be approached to merge or be acquired. So if you are a competitor and you're looking to be acquired or you're looking to ramp up and go to the next level, you may actually want to approach a stage 4 business and say, hey, I have a similar business. Well, why don't we merge? Why don't we work together? So that's very common for that to happen. But one of the most important ones is the one you mentioned, Bonnie, is the ability to leverage the franchisor's resources, their marketing programs, their brand equity, their support, their exclusive vendor arrangements. We can leverage all of that, the mentoring programs they have in place, the committees that are being formed that are actually there to help the franchisee. These are all distinct benefits that an empire business provides to a franchisee.
Isn't that where kind of the whole empire building thing begins, is that two plug-and-plays are kind of getting ready to move up, and they make alliances? Now, those are the benefits to the franchisee, but I know that there are definitely also some drawbacks.
There certainly are some drawbacks. Obviously, with an infrastructure that is this large to support that many franchisees and the additional demands of what's more of a technician versus a true entrepreneur or hunter, the demands increase. You sort of alluded to that when you were talking about government. As a city grows, the infrastructure grows. And then, of course, we have taxes and we have tolls and we have things that support these infrastructures. And the same is true in franchising. We have an empire business. The infrastructure is getting quite extensive and also very expensive to run. So over time, as the infrastructure continues to grow to support the system, we begin to see shareholder value dropping. So it's not uncommon that a stage 3 company will become a publicly held company. So by stage 4, we are starting to have shareholders that aren't particularly happy. How could we have 17,000 franchisees worldwide and we're not making any dividends? What's going on? So clearly that's the number one problem a stage 4 company has, is the need to perpetuate itself and the costs involved to do that. One of the other challenges that a franchisor has, and of course that then falls to the franchisee also, is communication problems. You've got silos with many, many layers of employees. So by the time the communication gets from the local marketplace or the franchisee to the top where a decision might be made, it's difficult to translate what that communication was, or even move the ship or be agile enough to accommodate the changes in the marketplace or the issues that the franchisor or the franchisee is currently dealing with. So there's this communication that gets heavy, and it gets difficult to go up and down through this bureaucratic system. That, of course, leads to the third big issue, which is we've got these franchisees, right, out in the marketplace. They have their finger on the pulse of the market. They know what their end user needs, what is concerning them, what they're asking for. But because it's so many silos and so many layers within this empire business, there's this disconnect from the franchisor to the end user. We don't know as franchisors what that end user is really saying or what they're really needing. So we begin to sort of lose a grip of how we can best serve end users, simply because we are no longer communicating as well with our end user. And then the one we've already talked about, Bonnie, the hunter instinct, and the franchisee starts to die away. He doesn't have the same hunter instinct because business is coming through the door by the brand alone. You know yourself well enough that a stage 4 empire business would not be a good fit for you as a prospective franchisee. You would feel more comfortable in an earlier stage franchise system. But naturally, there are folks that fit very well in a stage 4 franchise concept. This is sort of that bell curve, and where stage 4 is at the top of that bell curve. So naturally, there are going to be folks that do appreciate it. Now, you also have to remember that it sounds like a stage 4 company has the dollars to invest in these marketing campaigns and ongoing research and development, etc. But who's paying for it? It really is the franchisee. The franchisee is paying for it through their quarterly or monthly marketing dollars that they have to contribute. So they're paying their royalties, plus they're paying a marketing fee that supports this. And oftentimes they're also asked to contribute to the local marketing dollars. So there'll be a national marketing fee that they have to pay, but then they also have their local fees that they have to pay. So where once a franchisee put more in his pocket, now more is going towards the franchisor, and that's to be expected because there's more responsibility shifting to the franchisor off of the franchisee, and naturally that has to be accounted for also.
It's a stable system. People know who you are. The minute your sign goes up, recently we had a Zaxby's come into town. Everybody's watching this Zaxby's go up. The first thing they did was put that sign out there with the Zaxby's logo and all of this. The minute their doors opened, they had lines going out of the parking lot of people wanting to eat there because people already knew what a Zaxby's was. They maybe didn't have one in this town, but they visited in another town or whatever, and so Zaxby's is a name that people recognize. There were just people. That parking lot is constantly full. And it wasn't because they did some big marketing campaign locally. It was because that brand is so recognizable that there were people just totally ready to start patronizing that business immediately. So that's a huge plus because oftentimes when you go into business, it's a kind of iffy proposal. But if you go into a franchise that's pretty well established and has brand recognition like that, as long as you follow their template, their cookie cutter, you're pretty much guaranteed to make a profit.
Right. And that's the attraction of a stage 4. It's less risky for the franchisee who is risk averse, that this is a proven concept. It also requires a franchisee that has more customer service kinds of skills and really doesn't require the franchisee to do a lot of sales or a lot of out in the marketplace marketing. So you sort of, as you watch the franchise system evolve, you can also see the skill sets required of a franchisee also evolves and changes. So in the early stage franchise systems, we saw that it required a prospective franchisee that had broad spectrum skills because they were doing 90% of what needed to be done. The value package of the franchise system wasn't fully developed. It wasn't a divide and conquer yet, where the franchisor did one thing and the franchisee did the other. But by stage 4, it's shifted now back to the franchisor, where the franchisor is most of the responsibility is on them and less is on the franchisee, thus reducing the risk of the franchisee, increasing the ramp-up time, and the need for the type of skills that they have at that stage also has begun to change. So important for our franchisors and our prospective franchisees and, of course, our brokers to recognize what stage of growth a franchise system is in because that will dictate to some degree the type of franchisee that they're going to be looking for.
One of my favorite parts of our chats is when you stop and take the time to give some advice to our franchisees, our franchisors, and our brokers who make those matches between franchisees and franchisors. So from a franchisee standpoint, what is the advice that you would give someone going into a stage 4 franchise?
A stage 4 franchisee is one that needs to have strong customer service, oftentimes also human resources and training skills. So I would recommend a franchisee, if they are considering a stage 4 franchise system, that they recognize that they have those kinds of skills. And also to recognize, although there are wonderful benefits to going into a stage 4 company, including less risk, it is also a business where you have less to say about it. There's a lot of accountabilities, many reasons to need to comply, and a whole team of attorneys at the franchisor's location that's going to see to it that you are going to comply. So when looking at a stage 4 franchise system, ask yourself, can I comply? Can I follow the rules? Am I comfortable with not having as much to say as if I was running something earlier down the road? If I'm comfortable with it, do I have the core competencies that are consistent with what the stage 4 franchise system is going to require of me? So those would be the biggest things I would recommend, is just know what you're walking into and what you're going to be comfortable with.
And of course, one of the ways to kind of figure out where you are in this process as a franchisee is you can take that free assessment, and that'll give you a really good idea of where you are in this whole thing, right? What about the franchisors?
A stage 4 franchisor has a lot to consider when they're looking at prospective franchisees and when they're considering the challenges that are going to happen at stage 4. Now, one of the biggest challenges that a stage 4 franchisor is going to have is what we call a crisis of control, again, from Churchill's work. So this is a time when there's a lot of us against them kind of feeling. And so a franchisor doesn't want to create that. That's the last thing they want to create. They want to create a relationship where the franchisee and the franchisor are working in tandem, and they're part of a family, and they're all moving in the same direction. But it's normal when we have this infrastructure to support that controls, quality controls go in place. And that's the very thing that begins to create some of the crises or some of the issues between the franchisee and the franchisor. This is where we begin to see some challenges in validation. Our franchisee starting to push back. They don't like all these controls, all these accountabilities, having to dot every I and cross every T. But the franchisor needs these things to protect the brand equity. So it's a fine balance that our franchisor is going through, is to put these controls in place, these systems in place, and pushing them out to the franchisee is necessary to continue through their growth. But I would recommend, and this would be my number one recommendation, is to know that along with that are going to come some crises, some communication problems, some us against them kinds of feelings. So the better the franchisor is at communicating these upcoming controls, these upcoming systems and processes, and let that franchisee know how this is benefiting them, the less relational challenges there will be. And, of course, we can avoid then any validation problems. The second thing I would recommend with the franchisor is your growth. Your growth through stage 4 is going to come through delegation, through divide and conquer. One of the biggest mistakes I see my franchisors make that go from stage 3 to stage 4 is they take on so much that once upon a time was the franchisee's responsibility that it begins to look like a corporate business versus a true entrepreneur running their own business, and you've created a product or service or system that helps them. You don't want to look like the corporately owned locations out there. You want to do a divide and conquer. You want to delegate. You don't want to take on all of the responsibilities of the franchisee for many reasons. One, they lose their hunter instinct. 2, it's going to cost you a fortune. 3, your profitability will go down. And this is hands down the biggest mistake I see, and I turn blue in the face when I see my franchisors taking on the role of what a franchisee should be doing, offloading some of that responsibility onto themselves and the cost thereof, therefore actually creating a codependency instead of an intradependency between themselves and the franchisee. And then 5 years later, they're wondering why they're no longer profitable or why the franchisees aren't validating well. So that's the biggest advice I can give our franchisors, is if you can avoid stage 4 altogether, that's great. Stay in stage 3 forever and ever and ever. But if you're moving to stage 4, don't take on everything. Make sure there's a delegation of what the franchisee needs to do and what you need to do.
The difference between owning the business and the business owning you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, so franchisees, franchisors, what about the brokers?
The brokers are always in a unique situation, Bonnie, while they're consulting with a prospective franchisee, and it's always the same advice I'm going to give them is know your franchisee inside and out. Run the assessment to see what stage of growth your prospective franchisee fits in best. If your prospective franchisee is a stage 4 franchisee, respect that. This is a franchisee that is not able, for one reason or another, either due to social, emotional, relational, financial risks, aren't able to take the risks of a stage 1, 2, or 3 company. Do not put a stage 4 franchisee into an early stage franchise. It guarantees their failure. Move them into a stage 4 franchise system. And, of course, the only way to know if your franchisor is in a stage 4 is to do your due diligence yourself. Do the research on your franchisors. If they've done a top performer blueprint through Zorkel, naturally we'll provide that information to our brokers. But if we haven't, it'll be your job as a broker to see that your franchisor is indeed in stage 4 when you plug that prospective franchisee. It's about doing what's right for your prospective franchisee and what's right for your franchisor. So a stage 4 franchisee fits in a stage 4 franchise system. Mm-hmm. Don't put them anyplace else, or you do both, including yourself, a disservice.
Right, absolutely. And a broker's reputation is their capital. Hey, they always make a good match for me compared to, sometimes the stuff they give me works and sometimes the people they give me don't work. If you want to stay at the top of your game as a broker, I would imagine that keeping that reputation of making good fits all the time is going to be absolutely vital to your business.
You're so right, Bonnie. The franchisors recognize the smart brokers, the ones that are doing the work. They're assessing their franchisees, their prospects. They're educating their prospective franchisees. They're plugging them in or introducing them to the right franchise system. So there's no doubt the brokers are being judged by the franchise development teams at franchise companies, and of course their reputation is dependent on them succeeding. I mean, we want to put people in the right business. A broker truly does want to do that, and this tool just helps them do it even better. That's all.
Okay, awesome. Well, so next week we're going to be talking about stage 5, the ultimate. Now, and I just said that, the ultimate, but you know what? I'm getting the feeling as I'm listening to these various stages of growth and learning about them that at any point a person could decide that they're comfortable with a particular stage and stay there. There's nothing saying that the absolute destiny of every franchise is to get to a certain stage. Am I right?
Exactly. There's where W.W. Rostow's work comes in and where Zorkel is different. This is not levels. This is not just stages. It is circular. So literally someone can go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and then go right back to 1. Or somebody could stay in stage 2. So it is not true tiered approach, which you do see some work out there where there's this ultimate, this is where you're going. It definitely cycles back, and or someone can determine, I'm going to stay in stage 2 or I'm going to stay in stage 3. It's a conscious decision that they make. Now, in all honesty, by the time most get to stage 3, a certain level of inertia or pride gets in, and they go right into grow, conquer, build, whatever. But some of the best businesses in terms of profitability are those that consciously decide to stay at a particular place or to do it in a more controlled way.
Okay. So, and stage 5 is?
The hybrid.
The hybrid. See, that name just intrigues me. I can hardly wait to get to our next chat. So we're going to sign off for now, everybody, but hopefully you learned a lot about our stage 4 empire builders, and we're going to talk about the hybrids next time on our chats.